You've crossed dozens of borders in your life. Not at airports, not at checkpoints, not with a passport. You crossed them on your way to school, on your drive to work, when you moved houses, when you chose where to live or where you couldn't. They don't appear on official maps. They aren't marked by fences or walls. Most people never notice them at all. But these invisible borders decide how safe your neighborhood is, how good your schools are, how much your home is worth, and sometimes how long you live. This is not a story about national borders. This is not about states or countries. This is the story of America's invisible borders, the hidden lines that quietly shape millions of lives without ever being seen. America is often described as a land without rigid borders inside its own territory. One nation, one constitution, one system. But that image hides a more complicated truth. Beneath the surface, the United States is divided by countless invisible lines. Lines that exist not on physical maps, but in policy, law, and history. One of the earliest forms of invisible borders emerged with land surveys. Long before cities grew, the country was carved into grids, sections, townships, zones. These lines were administrative at first, designed to organize land sales and taxation. But over time, they became something more powerful. They determined who lived where. As cities expanded, zoning laws followed. Residential areas were separated from industrial ones. Some neighborhoods were restricted to single-family homes. Others allowed dense housing. These decisions weren't random. They were often influenced by race, wealth, and political pressure. The borders between these zones were invisible. You could walk across them without realizing it. But the effects were immediate. One side of the street had trees, parks, and well-funded schools. The other had factories, highways, and underfunded services. The line itself was never marked. But everyone felt it. School districts became some of the strongest invisible borders in American life. Two children could live minutes apart, yet attend schools with vastly different resources, graduation rates, and opportunities. These districts weren't created by accident. They were drawn deliberately, often following property lines that reflected economic status. Over time, school district borders hardened into social borders. Families moved or were unable to move based on them. Property values rose or fell accordingly. Entire life trajectories were shaped by a line most people never questioned. Postal codes, zip codes, became another invisible border. Created for efficiency, they quickly evolved into markers of identity. Insurance rates, loan approvals, healthcare access, and even political attention began to cluster around these numbers. A zip code could predict income, health outcomes, life expectancy, not because of geography, but because of policy layered over time. One of the most powerful, invisible borders was created through redlining. In the mid-20th century, financial institutions used color-coded maps to determine where loans could be safely issued. Neighborhoods deemed high risk were outlined in red, often because of the racial makeup of their residents. These red lines were never meant for the public to see, but their impact was massive. Investment flowed away from entire communities. Infrastructure declined, opportunities vanished. Even after redlining was officially banned, its borders lingered. The lines had shaped decades of development. Removing the policy didn't erase the effects. Invisible borders also exist in policing. Jurisdictional lines determine response times, patrol density, and enforcement strategies. Crossing one block can mean entering a completely different legal environment. People who live near these borders learn to sense them. They know where it's safe to walk, where it's not, where police presence changes. Yet no signs announce these transitions. These lines don't just divide land, they divide experience, and most Americans cross them daily, without ever knowing they exist. Invisible borders don't just affect where you live, they shape who you become. From the moment you're born, you're placed on one side of dozens of unseen lines. Healthcare districts determine hospital quality. School zones influence education. Housing regulations affect stability. Studies have shown that children born just a few blocks apart can have dramatically different life outcomes. Not because of personal choices, but because of which side of an invisible border they were born on. Employment opportunities cluster geographically. Some areas attract investment, innovation, and infrastructure. Others are left behind. These patterns reinforce themselves. Businesses follow money, money follows policy, policy follows influence. Transportation lines deepen the divide. Highways often cut directly through neighborhoods, separating communities physically and economically. Public transit routes prioritize some areas while bypassing others. The result is isolation, not by distance, but by design. Invisible borders also affect political representation. Voting districts are drawn and redrawn, often quietly. These lines decide whose voices carry weight and whose are diluted. While legal, the process creates borders that shape political power for years. Health outcomes reflect invisible borders clearly. Life expectancy can drop by years across a single boundary. Access to fresh food, clean air, and healthcare varies dramatically between zones. These differences aren't accidental. They are the cumulative result of decades of policy decisions layered on top of each other. And once established, invisible borders are hard to escape. Moving across them often requires resources, money, information, social networks. Those without these tools remain confined, even without physical barriers. The most unsettling aspect is how normalized this system has become. Many Americans accept these borders as natural, as if they simply emerged on their own. But they didn't. They were drawn, and they continue to be maintained. Some invisible borders don't stay in one place. They move. As cities grow, lines shift, neighborhoods are reclassified, zoning laws change, investment flows redirect. Entire communities can find themselves suddenly on the wrong side of a new border. Gentrification often follows this pattern. Invisible borders slowly move, bringing new resources into certain areas, but at a cost. Longtime residents are priced out. The border advances, and those who can't move with it are left behind. Other borders disappear entirely, but their effects remain. School districts merge, jurisdictions dissolve, policies change. Officially, the line is gone, but culturally and economically, it persists. People remember, they know which side they're from. Historical borders also leave shadows. Areas once divided by segregation still show disparities today. Even decades after legal barriers were removed, the invisible borders remain etched into infrastructure, wealth distribution, and social networks. Some borders were experimental, temporary zones created for specific policies. When those experiments failed, the zones were dismantled, but the disruption they caused lingered. Entire communities were reshaped for policies that lasted only years. When the borders vanished, the damage didn't. Maps rarely show these changes clearly. Official records move on, but lived experience doesn't. The most dangerous invisible borders are the ones people forget were ever created, because forgetting allows repetition, and new borders are always forming. Today, invisible borders are evolving. They're increasingly digital, algorithmic, data-driven. Credit scores act as borders. Online visibility determines opportunity. Algorithms decide what people see, where services go, and who is prioritized. These new borders don't follow streets, they follow data. Yet their effects are just as real. Where ads appear, which jobs are offered, how risk is calculated. Modern invisible borders are harder to detect and harder to challenge. Because you can't point to them. You can't cross them intentionally. You often don't even know they exist, but they still shape lives. The question isn't whether invisible borders exist. The question is whether we're willing to see them. Because once you see a border, it stops being invisible. And once enough people see it, it can change, or it can be replaced with a new one. So the real question is this: how many borders are shaping your life right now that you've never been taught to notice? If the most powerful borders are the ones you can't see, how would you ever know when you've crossed one?